just recently taken place, think of this talk as the latest fashion. Long enough to cover the topic, but short enough to make it interesting. So now, our family history begins in England, where both of my parents were born. Francis Robert Minter, my father, was born on February 23rd, 1896, at Huntington, Suffolk, England. Flora May Hattingham, Mum, was born on July 1st, 1909, St. Cross, Suffolk, England. So my mum was born on my sister's birth. My sister was born on my mom's birthday, but she passed away on mine. Now, in the blue folder, which Dawn's looking at, is a record of my relatives in England. There are pictures of my grandparents on both sides of our family. Dad's parents, Elizabeth and Robert Minter, had a general store. And one of the things they sold was oil. But it wasn't like, from what I understand, 3 grades of oil. They just had 3 different prices, one for the poor, one for the middle class, and one for the rich. Now, what was it? Oh, Mom's parents owned a large, over 1,000-acre farm, and they lived at Milton Hall, and there's a book on Milton Hall with 700-year history of her family home, and it's actually really interesting. Dave and I got to travel to England, and one of the things in that home is a hound's gate. So when they went on a fox hunt, it's a solid oak gate going up to the stairway, and the stairwell was solid oak from one of the ships, because they're real Tudor houses. They're made with shipwreck. They're not made to, like a house with flat boards like we have, right? They're real Tudor houses. And the hound's gate was interesting because the foxes wouldn't scratch any of the furniture because the top bar just moved around when the hounds came in and scratched. And anyways, the record, it's worth looking at the book. So the name Minter is an English pre-7th century occupational name for a moneyer, deriving from mint, a coin. The name Minter, M-Y-N-T-E-R-E, was originally given to the workmen who stamped coins and later to the supervisors of the mint. Important members of society had their names printed on the coins they were responsible for producing. In the records, there are various spellings of our surname, including Mintor, M-I-N-T-O-R, Minter, M-Y-N-T-E-R, Mintar, M-I-N-T-A-R, Minto, M-I-N-T-O. And surnames became necessary when governments introduced personal taxation. The first recorded spellings of our family name is that of William in the Fleet of Finds in Essex. And in 1584, on February 22nd, John Minter and Margaret Mulcaster were married. Are they related? I'm not sure, but my brother, who's done a lot of work on genealogy, he says that we were. So if you want to find out about your name, go to www.surname.com, and it has all the history of names and records. It's really interesting. Just one more footnote. You might not be interested in this, but there are approximately 2,880 people named Minter in the UK. That makes it the 3,376 most common surname overall. Out of every 1 million people in the UK, approximately 46 are named Minter. There you have it. More facts for a Trivia Pursuit game. My father, along with 6 of my aunts and uncles, 2 of my aunts actually, fought in or were nurses in World War I. And last fall, on November 10th, I told you about some of my dad's stories. So I'm not going to repeat those. But one of the battles my father told me about was the Battle of Somme. And although the general was warned the barbed wire had not been cut in no man's land, the men were still sent in. It was a butcher shop in hell. It was the single bloodiest battle in British history. There were 60,000 casualties on the first day. Another battle Dad mentioned was the Battle of Passchendaele. The battalion Dad went in at midnight on August 15, 1917, and with 950 men strong. They were relieved at midnight, August 16th, with only 128 men left. And like all imperial soldiers, they were paid a shilling, the equivalent of about 25 cents a day. Uncle Arthur was killed in the war, leaving a wife and 2 small children. Dad's father had also died suddenly. After losing his father and brother, Dad made a promise to himself that if he ever got out of the war alive, he would emigrate to Canada. Dad kept his promise and moved to Alberta for a fresh start. Dad worked and farmed at Gilthedge, Alberta for the next 14 years. In 1934, when the Depression was almost over, Dad returned to England for a long holiday. In the Wainwright Star, this note appeared in the November 7th, 1934 issue. Mr. Frank Minter is leaving at the end of the week to spend the winter in the old country. He sails from Montreal on November 22nd, and his friends are wondering if he will return still single. Speaking of the Wainwright Star, this is their version of Facebook, dated August 18th, 1937. And so August 18th, if you have ever died, moved, eloped, sold out, been shot, been born, had a baby, caught cold, been gypped, been robbed, been visiting, bought a car, had complaint, been married, been courting, been arrested, lost your hair, gone bug house, stole anything, sold your hogs, been in a fight, gone to church, cut a new tooth, had an operation, been snake bitten, or playing anything at all during 1937, phone the Wainwright Star. We want the news. Now, where was I? Well, to get back to that note about Dad going back to England. Well, my father didn't return single. On March the 27th, 1935, he married Mum, Flora May Hattingham. Dad and Mum left England on March the 29th and arrived in Wainwright on August 9th. Dad's brother, Uncle Len, met Dad and Mum at the station, and their life in Canada began. I don't remember much about living in Alberta, only stories I've been told, because we left when I was 1. 7 of us were born in Wainwright: Fran, Rob, Marg, Doris, Herb, Phil, and myself. Mike, the youngest, was born in Victoria. One of the stories is the day Fran helped Dad by putting water in the pump in minus 20-degree weather. Apparently, it took Dad and Uncle Len until 4 a.m. to take the pump apart, clean it, and put it back together. Dad spent some time explaining to Uncle Len that he shouldn't be upset because she's just little and was only trying to help. But that was Fran, always willing to do more than her share. Another story Mum told me was concerning Johnny, and Johnny was our horse. All of us rode Johnny. When Mum said I had just started walking and knew a few words, I wandered from the house and went to visit Johnny. Mum said she looked out and in a panic ran to find me behind Johnny with my arms around one of his hind legs. And Mum grabbed and asked, "What are you doing?" I looked up and said, "Loving Johnny." Mum and Dad had promised her parents they would return to England, but World War II broke out, and England was in ruins. My grandparents advised against it. Instead, we moved on October 7th, 1946, from Wainwright to Elk Lake. And Dad had already come out earlier and bought the poultry farm. And there's a picture of our farm in our house over there. Sorry. Okay, I'm just not used. Okay. At 50, Dad came to Elk Lake and started all over again. And most of us are thinking about retiring, but not my father. So, our address was 5126 Pat Bay Highway, and as Don Fisht explained, our property was expropriated by the Highways and Parks Department in 1970. The road leading to the National Rowing Center was part of our farm. Life at Elk Lake was full with many hard-working and memorable days. We sold eggs, corn, and lots of other vegetables, as well as fruits and berries at a fair price. It was our version of a farmer's market. People came by the dozens, especially on the weekends. When the corn was ready, that's when it really got busy. Even today, I've met people who tell us that our eggs and corn were the best. Speaking of the best, our family enjoyed the challenge of competing at Saanich Fair, and Mum looked after the eggs. She was really satisfied with her efforts when she won every first-class ribbon and every grand prize for the egg division, and that often happened, clean sweep. Mum was also an avid reader. She started her day reading the morning paper. She read magazines and novels by the dozen. Her book might be propped up in the kitchen, and she would be cooking with her free hand. Perhaps it was because of the amount she read that she had a way of getting to the crux of the matter and putting things in simplistic terms. One of my favorite stories is the egg story. I was about 12, and my job was to put the eggs on the trays as they came off the grater. So I'm putting these eggs, large here, medium, minding my own business. Then one of my school teachers comes in, and I won't tell his name, came in, and he demanded, "I want cracked eggs." Oh, I shouldn't bound, I guess. I want cracked eggs. So my mom politely said, "I'm sorry, we're all sold out. We have no cracked eggs today." And never did I enjoy my job more, because I knew where this might end. So, "You will just have to purchase great eggs today," Mom suggested. "No, I've come for cracked eggs, and 25 cents a dozen's all I'm going to pay." So, anyways, this went back and forth. The conversation went back and forth. Mom was becoming less patient, but the teacher was becoming more demanding. So finally, Mom reached her limit. She said, "If it's cracked eggs you want, cracked eggs you're going to get." Smack, 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 smack. And he picks the carton up, and it's dripping with eggs, and I'm still grading those. Anyways, that was one lesson that Mom taught that teacher he'll never forget. Mom was also the queen of recycling, before recycling was ever invented. Waste not, want not. And woolen sweaters and socks and anything wool they shipped it off somewhere. I have no idea. Maybe you people did the same thing. And it came back as floor mats, and those floor mats are still used today. They were wool, and I'm sure somebody's got them in some house. The other thing we did was, I've never ever known anybody to throw scraps unless it went into a compost. So I've never ever put food scraps into the garbage. They always go into a compost, because that's what we always did. So, and the third one was we would have a goose for Christmas as well as a turkey. And the goose down was always dried, washed, dried, and made into pillows. So we had goose down pillows every year, and they were the most comfortable pillows. So we recycled a lot, and you learn to do that. When the Minters arrived, also, the enrollment of Royal Oak and Cadova Bay schools skyrocketed. Fran, Rob, and Marg attended the tiny Royal Oak School, which is now a cafe of some sort. And I have the copy for that first register with their names on it from the school. Later, we all attended Cadova Bay, which opened with 86 students, grade 1 to 6, who shared a building with unfinished floors and outdoor plumbing. And there was one year when Mike was in grade 1 and Fran was in grade 12, leaving only 4 grades without a Minter. It was during that year McGavin's Bread delivered 25 loaves of bread to our house every week. The driver once told me that he delivered more bread to our house than he did to the restaurant at Elk Lake. When you grow up in a large family, it is like being part of a community. Everyone had responsibility, and we all did our share. We knew what we had to do, and without being told, you did it. The idea was to get your chores done as soon as possible and head to the lake for a swim. It was the time when Elk Lake was Victoria's playground, and if you didn't get there early, you didn't get the best spot. We spent endless hours swimming at the lake. Sadly, I haven't swam in the lake for years because now there's more geese than people, and the water is no longer crystal clear. When we were growing up, it was a time when people didn't lock their doors and when parents didn't worry about us heading out on our own. All of us belonged to sports teams. It was a time when honesty was the best policy. As far as I'm concerned, it was a really good time to be a teenager. Fran was the oldest. Fran's crown of white hair and her distinctive laugh welcomed neighbors who came to purchase eggs and vegetables at her farm on Santa Clara too. On January 20th of this year, Fran peacefully passed away. And I just want to read what I read for her eulogy at her funeral. Frances Evelyn Savage, although your body stayed a while and didn't really know, your body went on living, but your struggle we all know. That's why some may have said goodbye to the person that was you. But today, when we remember, we'll think of all the best, your flowers, vegetables, and eggs, which passed the neighbor's test. Girl Guides, the ballpark, and Saanich Fair, where your laughter filled the air. We'll concentrate on friends on Santa Clara and remember how you cared. And in the real scheme of things, your illness wasn't long. We think of you as yesterday, when you were fit and strong. And when we are asked about you, it's those things we will send, about a mother, a grandmother, great-grandmother, sister, and aunt, hardworking and devoted to the end. And so we are here today to pay our last respects to you, to say you will be missed, Fran, and we all love you. Rob was the one who was always constructing something. He took engineering at UBC, and his final position was supervisor of construction and maintenance for School District 61. He was born on July 30th, 1937, and he passed away in 2005 after a battle of cancer. What I remember about Rob most is designing a pea sheller when he was about 15 years old. He created this device that had a drum with paddles inside, and it smacked the peas, and the peas went down into a drawer, and then we had a long kind of conveyor belt. Do you remember that, Don? And the peas went down, and in no time, you could have a whole milk belt full of peas. Neighbors from all over came to use that pea sheller. I thought it was pretty amazing, and it still works. I think Mark has it now. So anyways, that's what I remembered. But the problem was, we still had to pick pails and pails of peas before you could use the pea sheller. Mark and Doris, like Fran, had careers in the bank. What I remember most is how they decorated our room. They cut movie stars out of magazines. Eva Gardner, Elizabeth Taylor, Eddie Fisher, Rock Hudson, Debbie Reynolds, James Dean, all of them. And there were hundreds and hundreds of pictures. And then we had a slanted kind of room in the bedroom, and they hung from the ceiling as well, all these layers, and everybody that came in couldn't believe the wallpaper job because it was movie star pictures. I mean, it was a kind of a history record. Herb was the most interested in farming. I remember an egg customer asking him how we were able to grow such wonderful tomatoes. Herb simply said, "You need to use manure would have probably been a better courteous way, but the lady was a little shocked, but she certainly understood what made the tomatoes grow." Herb went to the Vermilion School of Agriculture, and Pam and Herb had a farm near the airport. There's another story about Herb we all remember. We always had a cow, and Dad would milk it in the morning, but the boys had to milk it at night. So unfortunately, that poor cow got milked at all hours, something you should never do if you have a cow, but it happened at our place. So Herb came home from a date one night, so it's pretty late, right? It's midnight or so. And he goes down to milk the cow, and he's minding his own business, flips on the lights, and turns around, and in the calf pen, there's this man crouched down. And it scared the living daylights out of him. He came screaming out of the barn. His face was beat red. I said, Herb, you had the pitchfork. You had the advantage. Oh, it scared me. So anyways, the guy took off. Herb scared the living daylights out of him. But there's another story to this story. Mom was talking to Dawn and Nori Spencer's mom. And Mrs. Spencer told Mom that they heard some snoring under their bedroom window. And the man that Mrs. Spencer described and the one that Herb had an encounter with was the same person. So I guess he made the rounds. Maybe he stayed at your place sometime and didn't even know it. Anyways, I guess, now, Phil was number 6 in our family ranking. Phil took engineering at BCIT and owned and ran a very successful roofing and waterproofing company in Vancouver. Phil and Leslie are retired. This is the story of the 1948 panel van, and this involved Herb and Phil. So Herb was 15 and Phil was 13. Not old enough to drive a car, not old enough to have a vehicle registered in your name, but somehow these innocent young men had Speedway Motors into selling them this 48 panel because they wanted to buy a pickup truck, but found out a pickup was way too expensive because they made their money by selling corn. So they got all the money off the corn. It was a 45-45 split between them, and Mike got 10% of sales. But Mike says some days he got the 10%, some days he didn't. So anyways, they wanted this pickup truck. So Dad was mad. Oh, he was so mad, but so Dad registered in their name and got this panel, 48 panel thing back to the house. Then Dad says, well, this is ridiculous. Well, we're going to make it into a pickup. So somehow they got it down to Gary Cuttinghouse and got Gary to weld it and cut it off to make this pickup truck. But the story of the pickup truck was, it kind of upset Father. You never argued with my dad. So anyways, the truck never did get finished, but they did learn to drive it because everybody learned to drive on the pasture, right? You go down to the pasture and you drive. Like, I learned to drive by taking Dad's station wagon down and saying I was going to go pick up the hay because that was an excuse. I was going to work, you get to drive the car. So anyways, the boys never did finish their pickup. It sat behind the barn for years until it got towed away. But that was the story Phil remembered about how creative they were. Now, it was probably around 1958. Dad said he would never get a TV while we were in school. Dad felt we would not read or spend as much time on our homework or schoolwork. That was before Ripple Rock was going to be blasted. Mike said we got a TV 3 days before Ripple Rock. Rob carried the TV up to Mom and Dad's room and somehow attached wires to somewhere, and they got the thing going, and he said that Rob, Doris, and Mike watched Old Yeller. I don't remember any of this, but that's what he said. Then Dad came up to go to bed, and Mike got in trouble because he was way too late, and the next day the TV was moved downstairs in time for us all to watch the blasting of Ripple Rock. That's how we got TV, but we still had to keep up with our schoolwork. By the time I was at UVic, Mike and I were the only ones left. Our parents were also getting older. I did lots of the cooking, cleaning, and canning, and Mike was the one who was left to do the egg chores, and we had 20,000 chickens. There's a lot of eggs. It was a busy and exhausting time for all of us. It was a challenge to do your chores, keep up with university while balancing a social life. One thing I clearly remember was the day Mike was trying to catch up on sleep. His friends, Jerry Spencer and Mark Stuthers, came to visit. But before I woke him up, he was lying on the Chesterfield. I got the brightest red lipstick I could find, and I put it on his lips, and it wasn't even put on properly. It was all smeared, right? So he gets up, not knowing I had done the damage, and he walks in, and Jerry and Mark just killed themselves laughing. And Mike turned around without saying a word, and he said, "I'm going to kill you. What did you do now?" Like, as if I was in trouble. Anyways, Another day, after Christmas, it was really windy. So Mike and I got the idea it would be a good time to take Rob's sailboat out on the lake. Well, we didn't know much about sailing, and the wind got up. It gets quite choppy out there. In no time, we capsized. So, and also, Mom and Dad had bought me this really nice coat for Christmas, and I was wearing it. And no way was I going to let my coat go to the bottom of the lake. So we swam from, it was quite a ways out. We swam in, and this man, the police somehow got there. Somebody had called in. The police are on shore. And this man stripped to his shorts coming in to save us. And we're saying, we're fine, we'll be in, right? So we made it in. And then somehow Mark Stuthers got down there too. So Mark Stuthers somehow found a phone and phoned and got 10 bucks from CJVI, News of the Hour. And we were trying to do it without Rob knowing we had taken his boat without doing it. But here we were, soaking wet, and the boat's going on the other side of the lake. But anyways, we got the boat at the boat ramp. Obviously a good place to find a boat, right? And we got it home, but we had to tell Rob, we took your boat without asking, and sorry we capsized it, but it's all okay. That was fine. 10 bucks he got for that. After Dad and Mom's property was expropriated, an unfair and unbalanced system as far as I'm concerned, by the Highway and Parks Department, Dad and Mom moved to Boker near Beach Drive in Oak Bay, where they enjoyed a well-deserved retirement. Mom often wanted to return to the farm, especially in the spring. Mom would pick the flowers. I suggested perhaps you shouldn't be picking flowers out of the park. It's not your land anymore. Mom said, I don't care. I planted them and I will pick them. They got our land and they're not going to get my flowers. So that's what I think of when I see those daffodils and things growing there. One day I didn't have, that's the story about the bread. One day I didn't have any bread, so I made some buns and used a recipe from St. Michael's cookbook. I found one and knew I had everything required. I made the recipe and they turned out fine. So I thought I should check whose recipe it was, and it was Flora May Minter, my mom's. Had no idea that she had put that recipe in. And that's why I made the egg sandwiches in memory of our farm for my mom and for the 25 loaves of bread. So here, there's lots more Minter stories, but here endeth the lesson for today. Thank you for coming and listening to me. So that's it. Oh, now I'll just tell you about some of these pictures. This is the boat Mom and Dad came on. It was the Duchess of Bedford when they came. And this is, I'm not going to pass this book around. I don't want anyone to get a hernia. But it's the story of, this is Milton Hall. This is my mom's family home. It's 700 years history of her home. And where's that hounscape? It's in here. Anyways, these are the people that bought the house. It was my grandparents had the house, and then my aunt and uncle. And these are the people that have been there. And these are notes from my cousin in England. She's made some corrections that were in the book. So I don't know if anybody wants to see these. I'll pass them around. That's the register. And this is my mom and dad. For their 25th anniversary, they went back to Milton Hall. This is taken in front of Milton Hall for that book. And this is our family home. This is our family home that's taken down to make way for a park. But actually, they kept all of the lumber because it was such good lumber without any knots or anything. And the people took it apart board by board.
Tell them about the stained glass windows.
Oh, the stained glass windows, yeah. There were stained glass windows in the house, and before my dad, they took it, my dad gave everybody 2 stained glass windows. And our stained glass windows that Dave and I got are at our cabin on Phoebus Island. And this is our farm. So this is our farm, and this is the road going to the rowing club. That would be part of the farm. This is Fleming's, Michael Fleming, that has that tree farm. They were next door.
That one school picture came.
Oh, this is at Paxtonville. Marv and Rob and Fran first went to the convent, and then this was the one-room school at Paxtonville in Wainwright where they went. I don't have a picture of that little. This is actually from the registrar from Royal Oak School, and some of your names might be on here. This has got Fran and Rob are on here. I got it from the 150-year. I found it. You know they have the table of all the archives. I saw this and saw my brothers and sisters' names on it. Now, anyways. So, oh, I should tell you, this is when we left Wainwright. This is our family when we left Wainwright. The mom and dad and 7 of us. And then this is when we were at Elk Lake. And it was when we came home from school, some photographer had come and was taking pictures inside the house. So everybody, we dashed around like mad to get this picture done. And mom and dad were so busy getting us ready, they didn't get themselves ready. So mom and dad aren't in here, just behave of us. And these are some pictures of Elk Lake when you used to have those swans that they used to attack me, so I didn't like them. Once they were
Well, I think that was a wonderful presentation.
My name is Grace Nichols. I've lived here all my life. I lived on Snowdrop Avenue from 1923 to 1949, where I have moved to Burnside Road, 738, and I'm still living here today. And I still live on part of the property that belonged to my grandparents, which immigrated here to Canada in 1862.
What were their names?
My grandfather's name was Samuel C. He was a shipbuilder, and then in later years he decided to farm and built the property which borders Mackenzie to Carey, to Burnside to Marigold, and back to Mackenzie. The original farmhouse was on where Mackenzie Avenue now is. He had 4 children. One was my mother, and she married my dad, who had immigrated out here from Scotland and had set up a greenhouse business growing tomatoes and cucumbers, chrysanthemums, sweet peas, and also outside produce, which was sold to grocery stores and also in the Victoria Public Market, which was situated down by Centennial Square in Victoria. And years ago, before the war, there used to be a hydro pole, which was called BC Electric at the time, and a fellow used to ride his bicycle, and at night he would have the long pole would be attached to the electric pole, and he would push the pole, his little pole up, and push the switch on, and in the morning he would come by and put it out at night, pull it out in the morning. And that was our street lights, and they were far and few between. When you came out from the city of Victoria, even during the war, there was one at Burnside and Douglas Street, not another one till you got to Harriet Road, and then Tillicum Road, and Marigold Road, and then on to Wilkinson. And I don't think there was another one until you got to the interurban. And when you got off the bus at night, it was a dark place to walk. And especially during the war, when there was a brownout and people had to cover their windows to a point. It wasn't a blackout, but they called it a brownout. And we never felt uncomfortable because there wasn't, growing up then was a different time from today, where you're really not comfortable walking at night and that. And
how was the bus service? Was it quite often?
I beg your pardon?
The bus service.
We had, well, actually, we had it was every half hour because one went out to Wilkinson and made the loop from Holland Avenue to Hastings and Holland, and the other one did the loop to the interurban and Marigold. And one would be coming by on the hour and the other would be coming by on the half hour.
That's very good service.
Yes, that was back in the 30s and 40s. And they discontinued the one at the interurban, and it was just the hourly service on Burnside. I used to catch the bus when I worked downtown at Cross's Meat Market. I would catch the bus at 7 o'clock in the morning, and then I would come home on the 6 o'clock bus at night. And by the time you got home and had your supper, you were ready for bed.
It's a long day.
Yeah, and the bus fare when I grew up was 5 cents for children, and if we had a quarter, it would be 10 of that would have gone for bus fare, 10 cents to get into a movie matinee on a Saturday, and 5 cents for a nice chocolate bar. And
which movie theaters would you have gone to?
well, there would be the Capitol and the Dominion. I believe they were the only two at that time. There might have been one on Government Street. I don't really remember. I think there was one called the Empire.
No, the Rio and the Atlas, I think it was.
Well, Atlas was up on
That's right.
on Yates Street.
The Rio and the York.
That's right.
They were on Government Street.
And we had a fellow that used to sell meat. He'd run up and down the streets in his little truck, and he would sell small cuts of meat, and my mother would go out with a plate, and so would other mothers, and buy meat from his back of his truck. I doubt if any of it was really iced. And he would yell at the top of his lungs, "Butcher!" And of course they'd all open the doors and out they'd come. And later on, he built a little small grocery store, or meat market really, just off Marigold, off Burnside. And then in later years, his two sons operated it, and I worked for them twice after the war.
And what was his name?
George, and his name was Girton, and the sons' name were George and Gordon. And they had the meat market and grocery store and delivery, and the kids used to go to school, my boys, and I'd lock the door and go too, and I would come home before they would get out of school. So it was really handy and worked out quite well. And they lived next door to me, one of the sons, and the dad was not the dad, the son that I worked for. He was the usher at our wedding, and his daughter, Gail Girton, which you know, was our flower girl.
Oh.
And they lived there until, and Molly just passed away this past year, the mother. And the farm across the street, which is now St. Joseph's Church and School, he had quite a farm of Holstein cows, and he would save all the washings from the barn into a large cement tank, which he'd mix with water, and he would spray it on his fields, and he, instead of getting 2 crops a year, he managed 3. And in those days, if you wanted to go out or go to town, or you were working, like I was nearby, you could leave your windows open quite nicely. There weren't screens. And you would come home and the smell inside would be as bad as it was out. And sometimes there would be bits of straw and manure stuck on the outside of your house. And that because all of us had white houses at that time. There weren't the colored ones there are today. And
I remember riding the Burnside Wilkinson bus and that smell, and everybody
Yeah.
started closing their windows. And
yes,
but I guess if it got you 3 crops instead of 2,
yes,
it was worth
yeah.
it.
And you could go down to the dairy, which we did on occasion, and you could buy a pint of milk or a quart of milk, and you would have the little paper tops or cardboardy tops that they would
Yes.
put on, and most of the dairies had their own with the name, and quite often the kids used to love to collect them.
Yeah.
And you could spin them.
Mm-hmm.
And the train used to go across just down where where the Galloping Goose is,
Mm-hmm.
and that was, our son used to watch it out the window. I swear he could hear it coming from Gulfstream, you know.
Which train was that?
It was a steam train at one time, either CPR or CNR, one of the two. And we had a party line on the phone, which was operated by a telephone operator on Wilkinson Road near Interurban. I'm not sure, Roy Road is it? I believe it was.
Yeah.
And she you would ring and ask for a certain number, and she would put you in contact with that number. And our number was 42W, and our ring was too long and as short. And I had 2 girlfriends that's parents were on the same line, and one of us would phone one of the others, and the other one would pick up the phone, and we would have a 3-way conversation. But the telephone operator, she always knew what was going on and anything important, you know. And one day, my mother's friend, who family owned E&T Raper's Dairy out on Burnside, by Brander Kirchhoff has now, and she phoned, and my dad answered the phone, and she wanted to speak to my mom. And while the operator was getting the number, she says, "You can't speak to her. She's just had a baby." That was me. So the operator knew everything that was going on. And the grocery store and post office was situated at the bottom of Marigold and the Interurban. And she also knew who got what mail from and where they were getting it from. And sometimes it would get flooded over, and they would have to put up a boardwalk so that you could get into the grocery store, post office. And something else. Oh, and going to school at Mackenzie Elementary, we had to. We always would take a shortcut during the nice weather, and it was over fenced fields where Mr. Edge, who had a dairy farm by Panama Flats, which was called for several years, and he would put his cattle to graze out in these fields, and we had to climb over 3 stiles in order to get up to Cary Road to go to Mackenzie. And we just hoped when we climbed over we wouldn't be stepping in something we shouldn't. And then in the wintertime we would have to take the long way round, which was Marigold up to Cary Road and up onto Mackenzie Avenue. And then sometimes in the daytime it would be fine to go to school, but if we'd had rain and came home, it might be flooded over, because it would flood over on both sides. And my dad and a few others would put on hip waders and come and pack us all across, the little kids, all across piggyback home.
That's amazing.
And to get a Christmas tree, we didn't have far to go, because there were many, many empty fields and the houses were few and far between, and we'd only have 2 blocks to walk. And my dad would cut a Christmas tree down, and that would be it. And during the war we would go downtown and go to Air Force dances at Pat Bay, or Army dances. Some would be out towards Mary Hill, and we would go there, and the buses would take us out, and they would bring us back, and they would take us back downtown, and we would be back in town in time to catch the last bus home, which was probably 11:30. My husband was in the Navy,
Yes.
and he had an identical twin brother, and they served on three of the ships together on the corvette duty during the World War II on the North Atlantic. And we had quite some pranks pulled at some times. They would fool other people, of course. And his brother was musically inclined, and he took up the bass fiddle, and he somehow became connected to the Midnight Ramblers, which was a western country and western group who toured with Willie Nelson, Loretta Lynn, and Marty Robbins, and they did lower BC, Vancouver and that, and they used to practice in our living room, and we had quite the parties here sometime with the Midnight Ramblers, and we enjoyed every bit of it, and had lots of fun too.
And your husband and brother-in-law were their names?
Oh, my husband's name was Martin John. His twin brother was John Martin. And I'm afraid it was very confusing. And years ago, my husband, I think, had a little bit larger nose than his twin brother did. And I can remember my husband saying, I used to hate it growing up, because we'd meet people on the street and she'd say, oh, which is which? Oh, I can tell. This one has the larger nose. And so, anyway, and then when they first joined the Navy, my husband had a mole under his chin. And the parade ground instructor would make them work for it. He'd say, Nichols with the mole to the front, ho. And of course, my husband would have to go to the front. Then after that, my husband decided enough of that, and he went and he had it cut off.
Oh,
And so one day the parade ground instructor hollered, Nichols with the mole to the front. My husband didn't move. So he came back and he looked. He says, okay, you've got me this time, but look out.
Oh, what a mean
So-
thing.
But anyway, we've had a lot of enjoyable moments over the years, and we would have celebrated our 68th wedding anniversary this year. And that,
What was your wedding date?
May the 28th. Yeah.
You had 2 sons.
I have 2 sons. One is just about ready to retire from Island Farms, and the other one works in the crematorium at Royal Oak. They each have a boy and a girl. one is an granddaughter in Australia, coming home in August for a visit. Grandson is an auxiliary policeman with the city. And the younger two grandchildren, the granddaughter is hoping to go into medical field in biology. And the grandson, he's still in grade 12 at Claremont. And my husband's family have all passed away, and I was an only child. So I have two wonderful sons and a wonderful daughter-in-law.
Great.
A daughter I didn't have.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
that's lovely. And you told me once about living here, watching the goings-on with the St. Joseph's School across the way. That's kind of provided a lot of entertainment for you to watch the church and the school.
Oh yes,
go
I
up.
watched the school, the church being built, and the school, of course, now enlarging to take in all the children from St. Andrew's Elementary and St. Patrick's Elementary are all going to be housed here. There's another 8 classrooms. So, and I went over here to the open house with my neighbor, and the principal was greeting everybody as they came in, and I'd taken the picture of the church being built. He says, "Oh, my father designed that church, John DeCastry."
Oh, Joan DeCastry.
And his name was the principal and that. And the kindergarten teacher is a neighbor of my son that works at the crematorium.
Oh.
And so we had a nice tour of it. And one day they had a great big statue of St. Joseph's on the front of the church. And one morning my neighbor down the street, he phoned and he says, "Gracie, phone the police." And he says, "There's a man walking on top of the roof of the church." And he said he's broken the hand off of St. Joseph's, and he's pulling the shingles off of the church roof. So there was another fellow had seen him, and he gave chase because he realized he was going to be caught. And he chased him. He followed him in his car, and they caught him on the Galloping Goose not far from the hospital. But he was completely out of it, I think. And we've also, in the early days, caught many kids rifling cars on a morning when you never had to lock your cars.
Mm.
And that, we remember phoning the police one morning, and Dale was watching out the window, and he says, "Yeah, he's going into a Buick." And he's rifling the glove compartment. And the police says, "All right, keep tabs on him." And they nailed him. He says, "What's he into now?" Just as he was approaching. He says, "Well, he's going through such and such a car." And they nabbed him. And you'd be surprised what they got out of his pockets and stuff.
Oh,
And,
see. That's great.
yeah. And my two sons went to Marigold Elementary. And Dale graduated from Mount View High School like I did.
Mm-hmm.
And then my daughter-in-law and son graduated from Spectrum
That's close by.
after it was built.
Mm-hmm.
And my oldest son, we used to take him to Strawberry Vale kindergarten, I guess it was, with Mrs. Cummings.
I didn't know.
Oh, I'm sure she's an icon in the neighborhood over there.
Yeah.
And that was up by the Strawberry Vale School.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Through too.
oh yes, I have pictures of Mackenzie being put through, and that, and never thought I'd see the church being built or Mackenzie Avenue,
No.
and
All on your grandfather's property.
well, not the school, not
No,
the,
no.
just this side,
Mhm. Right.
yeah.
So that's quite an amazing.
Yes, and my grandfather had a lot to do with Strawberry Vale Community Hall, and I helped to build it, and I guess, did other things you think of. Oh, my aunt was my mother's sister. Was a heroine, they called her. She saved two different people's lives, rescuing them in a rowboat by herself from people that had sailboats that had overturned. And she was in the assistant or housekeeper for the lighthouse keeper on Barron's Island, which is a very small place near the inner harbor. And she was written up in a book called Wild Roses at My Feet, of the different people in BC that were well known at the time. And then I can say that my uncle was a bootlegger, and he used to sell to your father-in-law. It would be your father-in-law,
Yeah.
wouldn't it? Yeah. Yeah. My dad used to say, "Uh-oh, there goes Josiah Bull up the hill."
Yeah. Well, didn't he go to drink somebody's wine?
Yeah, my uncles.
Yeah.
And the Saanich police would buy wine too from him,
Oh.
stuff to make. And then after he passed away, behind the 2x4s in the basement, you know, the ones that come up,
Yeah.
we found all his wine. So my
Oh.
husband and his twin brother made a still. And they distilled the wine. And then when the midnight ramblers come, we'd have a party.
Yeah.
And it was the days when you could buy a turkey and a ham and make salads and everything and do it for about $25. There. He's a good boy, aren't you? Yes, you are. Yes, you are. You're a good boy. You a good boy? You spoiled little mutt.